In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the biggest mistakes I made in my last relationship. Because although most of my content is about picking up girls, it's about, how to get the girl in the first place, it's just as important, if not more so, to develop the skill of maintaining a healthy relationship. I know a lot of guys who learn about pickup, and most of them want to get into a relationship at some point, or at least they do. And if they don't know how to manage a relationship effectively, they end up in these very toxic, unhealthy relationships. And it's very easy to blame all the flaws in your relationship on the other person, on your partner. You know, they're too selfish, they don't communicate well enough, etc., etc., etc. And those things may have merit to it, but I think it's important to also turn the light back on yourself and to think, what could I have done differently in that relationship, or during the relationship, to think, what could I be doing differently that might change the nature of this relationship so that it's healthier for both of us. And I just got out of a 4-year relationship. It was a very long relationship, and although there were a lot of great things about it, looking back, there were some mistakes I made, and I want to be vulnerable about that so that you can learn about your future relationships, because you're probably going to relate to some of these mistakes I made. You probably make some of them in your own relationships, and this might give you the self-awareness to see, holy shit, I do that too, and that's causing my relationships to be less healthy than they could be. So now I can change my own relationships. And I think the best way to do that is to lead by example and to own up to my own mistakes. So with that said, let's get right into it. The first mistake I made was not accepting that me and my ex had very different communication styles. I'm someone who, if I want something, I'll say it. If I'm upset, I'll say it. I try to be very, outspoken as to what I want, what I don't want, and I think that's a good way to communicate. However, my ex was a lot more passive in terms of whether she would say something was upsetting her. She didn't like to be upsetting. She didn't like to cause drama. She didn't like to cause friction. And so her way of dealing with that would be to, let's say she wants me to help with the dishes. She's not going to say she wants me to help with the dishes. Let's say she wants to do more things, like do more activities. She's not going to bring that up very directly. Maybe over time, she'll bring it up occasionally, but she's not very assertive with what she wanted. And even though I knew what she probably wanted, I got the hints, I got her sub-communications as to she wanted me to help around more on the house. She wanted me to, take her out on more trips. She wanted me to do more things for her. And I kind of knew that, but because she wasn't saying it outright, I used that as an excuse to not do those things. And that led to this kind of resentment to where she feels like she's not getting these things that she deserves. And I feel like she's not being honest and open with her communication. And although there's a degree of truth to both sides, there's a degree of truth to my side too, looking back, what I should have done is been more proactive about giving her the things that I thought she wanted, about doing those things. And that underlying resentment that we both had towards each other wouldn't have built up nearly as much, and things would have been more, what's the word I'm looking for? Things would have been more relaxed, right? There would have been less tension, friction in the relationship if I just made a point to proactively think, okay, what does she want? What is she hinting at? Because people who don't communicate directly, they'll still hint at it. They'll still make suggestions occasionally. It's just they're not very assertive about it. And it's easy to ignore someone when they're not being assertive. They're not really serious about it. But I knew that she was, and that caused a lot of problems in my last relationship. The second big mistake I made in my last relationship was timing. I chose a terrible time to get into a relationship because I had just started my business, and now I'm making a decent amount of money. I'm making enough that, I can live comfortably off of it. But when I started this relationship, I was barely making ends meet. I didn't have a solid income. I didn't know whether I was going to be successful with my business. And at that time, that led to a lot of codependence. I became basically reliant on her financially, which of course is going to lead to a lot of stress. She's the kind of person that's very giving and kind, so was willing to be helpful, right? To help, say, with food and stuff like that. But that's still this creating this dynamic of friction because she's giving me these things and what am I, doing in return? I wasn't in a place where my life was solid. And if your life isn't solid, if your financial situation isn't solid, your social life, you don't have friends that you're happy with, you don't have a good relationship with your family, like the basic pillars of your life, your fitness, you're not happy with that. If those things aren't in a decent place, it's going to affect your relationships. A relationship isn't some pill that's going to make you happy despite the fact that you're missing all these other things. In fact, those things are going to become exaggerated by the relationship. They'll be made worse in a lot of ways because you're looking at that as an escape, but you're bringing those problems into the relationship. You're bringing those to her or him. And so now she's taking part of the load and she's going to feel resentment for that, or at the very least, she's going to feel stress about this. So this caused a lot of stress in my relationship. I should not have gotten into a serious relationship when I did. Being in a casual relationship during those phases of your life is fine, but if you get into a serious relationship where you're like cohabiting or you're seeing each other multiple times per week, and let's say your job isn't very solid, you're not happy with it, the basic pillars of your life are not good. You don't need to be perfect. I'm not saying you need to be driving a Maserati and you need to be friends with celebrities or shit like that, but is it good, right? Is my financial situation, my job, good? Am I happy with the way I'm living my life? Do I have good hobbies? Or do I feel like I'm a leech and like I play video games all the time and I have no passions and I'm depressed about my lifestyle? Well, you're going to bring that into the relationship and it's going to get worse. So that was a big mistake that I made looking back. That caused a lot of stress for the relationship. And I think a lot of people get into relationships because they think that will fix their life situation, but it won't. It will not fix your life situation. And if anything, it's going to end up making it worse because you're using it as an escape, but you're avoiding the real problem. And the more you avoid the real problems, the more they get exaggerated and worsened over time. Another one is understanding. I think the book is, it's really cheesy, and I was resistant to this book for a long time. It's called The 5 Love Languages. I never wanted to read something called The 5 Love Languages. It just immediately thought, throw up, That was my reaction to it. But having learned about it, I should have acknowledged that my ex and I had different love languages. So mine are physical touch, right? That's one of them, is that the physical intimacy, like, holding each other, being around each other, that kind of thing. And hers were gifts and quality time. Those are the two big ones, gifts and quality time. And I knew that. She gave me hints that she wanted gifts, that mattered to her. But because it doesn't matter to me, I don't really care if someone gives me a gift. That doesn't really do much for me. But for her, it did. And I just kind of like made the assumption that she is the same way I am. So I projected my own desires and wants onto her. And that led to, again, friction in the relationship. So I should have been giving her more gifts, making a point to do that because that matters to her. Another one for her is like words of appraisement, something like that, like, positive feedback. Again, that's one that for me, I don't really crave, partly because, having an online business, I get too much of that already with the comment section. I also get plenty of hate comments too, but I get plenty of validation in that way, so that doesn't matter much to me, but it mattered to her. And I knew that, but I didn't want to acknowledge it because it's different from me, or because I thought it was petty or egotistical. I had these narratives about that being bad, but she wanted it. I shouldn't judge it. I should just be able to give her what she wanted. So that was another big one. And the third one for her was quality time, which is like going on a date, going to the park and walking around, going on a little trip, those kinds of things where you're spending time where you're really focused on each other. Whereas I'm someone who a lot of time I'm perfectly content to watch some TV show in bed. That's my relaxation. But I could have balanced that out more and done more spent more quality time with her, or knowing that we have such different types of desires from a relationship, not get into a relationship with a person who has such different values of what they want out of a relationship. One of the two things: either you make the compromise and do more of what they want and the relationship will be happier, or you avoid getting into that relationship when you do the checklist, like, are our values close enough, or are they too different? And or like our love languages, are they too different? And if they're too different, then just don't get into that relationship in the first place. Being choosy about how you get into a relationship is very important. And a lot of people, most people, the first time they have that strong chemistry, that strong initial chemistry with a person, they get into a relationship. But rarely, it's only a small percentage of people that you can really have a healthy relationship with. Most people, there's just too much dissonance in terms of your values, your desires, what you want out of life. And even if you have good sexual chemistry or even good social chemistry, that's not necessarily enough unless you also have similar values. So the last mistake is kind of an extension of that from the love languages, is that we wanted different things long term, and we both knew that. She wanted to be a traveling, her job is something that's going to involve a lot of traveling, where she's helping people in poor countries, and that's something that I probably wouldn't want to be a part of in the future, like something I couldn't go with her to do that. So that's an inherent problem. And then secondly, she wanted to get married and have kids, and I have no idea if I want that, but I know it's very likely I'll never want that. And so that causes this inherent problem, because if you're in a long-term relationship and you have a mismatch in terms of that, eventually that's going to end the relationship. And a lot of the time it's better to do that sooner rather than later as the resentment builds up. Those are the biggest mistakes I made in my relationship. I want to own up to them, not in a way where I'm like making excuses or secretly I'm kind of pretending to own up to my mistakes, but ultimately I'm blaming it on the other person. It's important to be able to own up to your own mistakes, and that's the difference between someone who grows and their life improves over the years and someone whose life gets smaller, it shrinks, they end up becoming pettier, more egotistical, more bitter, and less happy. I think that's the underlying difference, and that extends to relationships as much as to any other area of life. Being able to take responsibility for the fact that you're probably making mistakes. If you're in a very unhealthy, toxic relationship, well, part of that is your fault. At the very least, it's your fault for staying in that relationship. What does that say about you? What is going on psychologically that makes you want to stay in this unhealthy relationship? Is it really just them manipulating you and them doing things that are messing with your head? Or are you letting that happen and you're responsible for that as well? And that's what it's important to think about. This applies to the pickup stuff that I talk about, being able to think, what mistakes am I making that are preventing me from getting the results that I want? But also any area of your life, including relationships. Really think, what mistakes am I making? Not in a beating yourself up kind of way. I'm not beating myself up as I talk about these things, but in a, how can I learn from that kind of way? How can I be better in the future? How can I use that for self-improvement? And that is what's going to lead your life to get progressively better every year. And I'm saying this from experience because my life when I was 18, 19, man, I was in a constant state of extreme stress, extreme anxiety. And over the years, it's slowly gotten better because the one quality I've always had is that I'm willing to criticize myself. I'm willing to think about how can I improve myself and do that genuinely without my ego getting too much in the way. And that's something that everyone should work on cultivating because it's made my life get progressively better each year. Each year I've had less stress, less anxiety, and more feelings of happiness and fulfillment. I mean, there's ups and downs, of course, but overall that's been the trajectory of my life, and it's because of that underlying principle of what I'm talking about in this video, being able to criticize yourself openly and honestly and to grow and learn from those criticisms. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Hitting the like button, leaving a comment, it takes about 2 seconds, but it helps my channel grow. If you found this video useful, you find my videos useful, it's fair to say other people are going to find them useful too. And so by leaving a comment, leaving a like, you're spreading the video to other people. You're helping the algorithm say, okay, see that this video is useful, and then more people will see it. And it's free. It only takes a couple seconds. You can literally say, I hate this video, your advice sucks. That will help me just as much as saying you love the video and it was extremely insightful. Either way is fine with me. And if you want to see my best content, then check out my full-length book called The Method. It's linked below. Check it out. Until next time.